Welcome back, everybody, to another Three Kingdoms DLC testing video. So now that we have finally covered all of the regional units that are in the game right now, I'm going to start my breakdowns of the actual upcoming civilizations, of which there are 5, and this video is going to be all about the Jurchens. So in this little series, I'm going to go ahead and cover once again the bonuses and tech tree, in case you guys forgot about that, but then I'm really going to take a deep dive into, okay, so how do these bonuses actually exist in the game? How do they work? What do they affect? What do they not affect? What interactions does it change when it comes to different units or technologies and all that stuff? And we're really just going to sort of hunker down and see what the testing can be done for the Jurchen civilization. And I gotta say that I really am looking forward to the Jurchens. I think they're going to be a fun civ. And definitely let me know in the comments what you think of the Jurchens, and definitely leave a like, of course, if you enjoyed as well, because with all of the drama of the Three Kingdoms stuff aside, I really do think that the Jurchens and Ketons are worth getting excited for, and hopefully at the end of this video you will feel the same way. So with that, let's just go right back in and run down through their bonuses. So before we jump into the civilization bonuses, I should just say that the Jurchens represent in-game basically the Qin dynasty in northeastern China. Yes, it is yellow from Genghis Khan III into China, but they are a wholly distinct people group from the Mongols, from the Chinese, from the Koreans, and eventually grew into the Manchu that you're probably a bit more familiar with in like the 1600s. So the Jurchens have long been a civilization that could have existed in AoE2, and really, I think, do a nice job of fitting what we would imagine an AoE2 civ to look like. So we can sort of not include the Jurchens here with, I think, a lot of the issues that people have with this DLC in general. With that said, Jurchens, cavalry and gunpowder civilization. Their one eco bonus is that the meat of hunted and livestock animals doesn't decay. So this is a really interesting bonus, guys, and I'll show you guys the testing on that one later. And it's basically a strong early game to feudal age eco bonus, but that's all you have for the entirety of the game, for your economy. Your main military bonus is that mounted units and fire lancers attack 20% faster starting in the feudal age. This is, again, your main military bonus. It affects the scout line, it affects cav archers, it affects steppe lancers, and we'll have to see how that increased attack speed changes the interactions when it comes to those particular units. Then you kind of have a twofer bonus, which is siege engineers available in the castle age, and then siege and fortification upgrades cost minus 75% wood and research 100% faster. So I'll show you guys what technologies that affects, and of course how that really interacts with what it's like to defend in the mid-game, especially with the Jurchens. Their final civ bonus is that units receive minus 50% friendly fire damage, so I'll show that too. Their team bonus is gunpowder units getting +2 line of sight. For the Jurchens themselves, that really just includes the Grenadier, the Fire Lancer, the Rocket Cart, and the Bombard Cannon. But of course, when it is expanded to other civs, it includes things like hand cannoneers and cannon galleons, just as you would expect. Their unique units are the Iron Pagoda Cavalry, which is a knight stand-in for the civilization, so plenty of testing with that. And then the Grenadier, which is a gunpowder unit and is their replacement to the hand cannoneer, so more testing there too. Their unique techs are fortified bastions in the castle age. Fortifications regenerate 500 HP per minute, so I'll show you guys how that changes any interactions as far as like Treb Wars with castles goes. And then their Imperial Age unique tech is Thunderclap Bombs, which is rocket carts, grenadiers, and lochuans detonate when exploded, and their projectiles produce additional explosions. It's a very weird unique tech, but it's also super awesome, even down to the name. I've already shown you guys the rocket cart and lochuan demonstration, so this is going to be more about the Grenadiers. So those are their bonuses, guys. Now let's quickly go back through their tech tree. Alright, so before getting into the units themselves, just note that at the blacksmith, you missed the last armor upgrade for infantry, but have everything else. So that's just going to be, you sort of, before you have to see like, oh, is their archery range or whatever good or bad, you have to see what their blacksmith upgrades are. So yeah, you have everything except plate mail armor. At the archery range, you have crossbowmen, but no arbalest, and you miss thumb ring, so your regular archer line is not that exciting. Your skirmishers are pretty good, you only miss thumb ring, which isn't a big deal for them. You have the Grenadier to replace the hand cannoneer, and as you can see, it is available in the castle age. And then you have your cav archers, which do fire 20% faster, but you miss the very important technologies of thumb ring and Parthian tactics. So we'll have to see just how good are the Jurchen CA. At the barracks, on top of missing the last armor upgrade, you miss long swordsmen, and are in fact the only civilization in AoE2 to miss that upgrade. So yeah, Swordsman line, not really going to be an area where you want to tech into with this civ other than like an early men-at-arms rush. That said, you do have halberdiers that are mostly upgraded, only missing the last armor upgrade, so it's kind of like playing with Hun halberdiers, which is serviceable, if not super exciting. And then you have your fire lancers, which I showed you guys in some testing. You have gambesons to affect them, which in some ways can help mitigate for the missing the last armor upgrade, and that faster attack speed on the fire lancers does make it a fairly potent unit. The stable is going to be a strong point of the civilization, as remember all of your units attack 20% faster, but beyond that you miss the knight line entirely, and camels, but you do have steppe lancers and hussars with full upgrades plus that extra attack speed. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, and I'll have to show you guys in practice how these sorts of units really match up. Also keep in mind that the Iron Pagoda unique unit is basically a stand-in for knights anyway, so you still get a heavy cavalry option. At the Siege Workshop, they are one of the best civs in the game. In terms of diversity, you have fully upgraded siege rams. Your rocket carts are a replacement for the Mangonel line, and Jurchen heavy rocket carts in late game are basically very strong siege onagers, so you're not missing anything here with not having the Mangonel line. And then you just have heavy scorpions and bombard cannons with full upgrades, on top of that siege engineers technology available in the Castle Age, which is a really big help for rocket carts and scorpions especially, but even getting that extra ram damage is quite nice. The Navy is kind of average. You have galleons with bracer, you have heavy demo ships, you have probably the best Lochuans in the game, but you still miss shipwright and fast fire ship, and missing shipwright really limits your abilities in heavy water maps in the late game, as it's just such an important tech for efficiency. And then missing fast fire ship really limits your ability in early Imperial Age when it comes to hybrid maps, or even maps like Migration or Pacific Islands, where you typically are going for a lot of land army, but then in Imperial Age you might want to go for a little bit of navy, and just missing fire ships is a big dent to that. Defenses are excellent with the civilization. You miss bombard towers, which, I mean, isn't amazing, but at least you have fully upgraded keeps, which is nice. And then missing heated shot is really just an issue for water maps, so other than that, your defenses are quite good. The Iron Pagoda I will go in depth with, but basically it is a strong knight replacement with some different interactions there. You do miss sappers. Very sad. Actually, wait a minute. Hold on. This is a tech tree bug. You don't miss sappers. All right, hold on, guys. See, right here, I can research sappers, but the tech tree says you cannot. All right, I need to report that to the devs. But okay, so yeah, you have sappers, guys. Don't worry, don't panic. You can research sappers. The monastery isn't especially exciting because you miss heresy and redemption, but you do have everything else, so when it comes to facing units, your monks have the upgrades they need. They can survive monk wars just because of atonement and block printing and theocracy, so that's there. But yeah, heresy is definitely a sore miss in a civilization that has a lot of very expensive units, and redemption is, well, just one of the most important monk upgrades in general, so I'd say a fairly average monastery. And then for eco upgrades, you have everything available to you, so they are one of the few civs to have every single eco tech in the game, which is nice to have because they are a late game oriented civilization, but after the early game you have no eco bonus. So that is going to be nice for them, and that is going to be your basic summary of the Jurchen tech tree. Now, with all of that basic stuff out of the way, let's get into what you guys want with this video, and that is the deeper dive into the testing. Alright, so first let's check out the economic bonus. How is it worded? Meat of hunted livestock and animals doesn't decay. So what does this mean exactly? Before we even get into how strong it is, how does it work? So as you can see here, you have a sheeper, and I kill the sheeper, and it has 100 food still, and it just will not go down. And this will be so long as the Jurchen villager was the last one to touch it. And you can see that this will also be the case with boar. This is actually just one food that was actually gathered. It's not it's not any decay. However, take a look at this when I switch players. Alright, so the sheep is at 100 food right now, but as soon as I task this other civilization to gather from the sheep, it's going to start to decay again. So it's kind of an awkward situation where you can't, like, kill sheep for your allies or hunt for your allies. As soon as another civilization starts to gather from the sheep, or boar, or deer, it's going to begin to decay again. Now, if I, say, kill this deer with the Cyan villager, and then I swap back over to the Jurchens, see this deer is slowly rotting away. As soon as I go right back here, and am now the one who's gathering from it last, the deer suddenly stops decaying. It's amazing. It's magic. So that's really how this bonus works, guys. So if the Jurchen villager was the last one to either attack the hunted or sheep or whatever, then there is no decay involved. as soon as another civilization is involved with it, some way or the other, homie's got some problems here. But yeah, as soon as another civilization is involved with the hunted food in any way, shape, or form, it will no longer stop decaying. It'll start decaying again. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Now let's see, how does this actually help you in a regular game? Alright guys, so basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play a, just a regular arena game here in the Dark Age. I'm going to go through all 8 goats, and then, I guess I assume they're elephants on this generation. Yeah, all of the elephants and gazelles, and we're going to see how much food we have collected after we've trained 20 villagers and taken all of the huntable and herdable food. This, I think, is going to give us at least a pretty decent representation of how much food we're going to be getting in an average game. Keeping in mind that, especially with the addition of chickens and whatnot, there's a lot of variability in how much food you save in the early game, because there's just different values of food you have in hunt and herdable resources. So note that this value isn't going to be exactly the same across all maps, but this is at least as close as I can get to a controlled setting, because we're going to do the same exact test afterwards with the Jurchens and see the difference in food collected. So see you on the far side of that. Alrighty guys, so I basically did a typical Dark Age build on a closed map, and instead of sending villagers to forage bushes or over to build farms, I just had them go over to wood. So you can see that with, I would say, is a relatively efficient Dark Age, where I was able to push in all of my deer, get both of my elephants, and really have no idle time or anything like that. We have 1,002 food left over after training 20 villagers. So we've collected around 2,000 food this game. Let's see how much more we get on this exact same generation with the exact same build, but with the Jurchens. Alright, again, so it is literally the exact same map generation as before. And yeah, I'm really curious to see how much more food we're going to be getting. Keeping in mind that, of course, these are not going to be exact values that will apply to every single game, because there's always going to be like some slight difference in decaying for most civs. And most build orders, it depends on the map as well, like how many villagers are you taking all of your sheep with, all that good stuff. So just note that this test is not going to be conclusive, to say the least. But I still think it'll be doing a good job of giving you guys an idea of how this should impact a regular game of AoE2. Anyway, see you once I've trained 20 villagers and taken all the food. Yeah, this is actually already throwing off my timings a little bit, because I'm having more food than I am used to. So I'm actually going to build a house with this villager when normally I would not need to do that, because the goats would have run out at this point. So you can see that you're going to have to do maybe some slight adjustments to your early build orders. Oh yeah, something else to keep in mind is that for everything except chickens, like all other meat in the game decays at 15 food a minute, and chickens decay at half that at 7.5 food a minute. So that's like, if you're a numbers person, that's the value you're looking at. Alright, so you can see here that after all of the food is gone, as the Jurchens, we ended up with, what was it? Around 200 more, almost exactly 200 more food. So, again, this is a reasonable Dark Age that we can control as best we can while also having it feel like a real AoE2 game. So you could say that on average with the Jurchens, when you complete all of your food in the early game, you'll end up with around 200 more food, which is a nice boost for sure. It helps smooth out your early game. Of course, if you do end up killing deer or something further away from your TC, it's less of an issue. Note that if you're sending vills out to take deer, you need to send 4 villagers instead of 3 to make sure that you get all of the food. But yeah, it's just a nice, good early eco bonus. I'm sure it'll help out the new players as well, who might not be as accustomed to hunting their deer, but you can see even in a relatively efficient early game like I had, you're still able to get a nice couple hundred extra food out of it. Alright, next we're going to be testing out to see just how much of an advantage the 20% faster attack speed is for your mounted units starting in the Feudal Age. We already tested out the Fire Lancers in their own video. So remember guys, this includes Cav Archers, Light Cav, Step Lancers, and technically your Iron Pagodas, but we'll see in a little bit as far as that goes. Alright, so for your Feudal Age scouts here, remember, you're going to be the only civ that are going to get this faster attack speed in early game. So here we have some generic, no upgraded scouts in Feudal Age versus the 1.67 reload time you get here with the Jurchens, and let's just see how much of an advantage this is. As you can see, guys, it's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to just facing generic scouts, which is, again, almost every civilization, yeah, that you can still win with half your numbers left in 6 scouts v 6 scouts, which is pretty reasonable for a Feudal Age fight, so that's pretty good. And just as a quick test, let's see how they compare to the, good scout civs. Alright, I swapped player 2 over to the Magyars, so let's see how much of a difference this makes versus that free forging that Magyars get. Okay, pretty good. Okay, the Jurchen early game is actually sick, man. These scouts are not to be trifled with. Now, you don't get the, I guess, early advantage of the fewer hits to kill villagers. And remember, like, if you're chasing down a villager, the reload time isn't that much of an issue. This is really a combat bonus as opposed to a raiding bonus. Because, like, if you hit a villager, chances are the reload time has elapsed before you get that second hit in. Or really any unit that you're trying to micro against. So that's something to keep in mind, but like in terms of raw melee engagements, this bonus is very good in the Feudal Age. Alright, now doing the Light Cav comparison, this is with post-Castle Age upgrades. Again, now we're back to facing generic Light Cav. So let's see how much of an advantage this is in the mid-game. Not that you tend to have all of your blacksmith upgrades in the mid-game, but this is as close as we're gonna get. So yeah, that Light Cav was one hit away from being dead. So the effects between Feudal and Castle Age are very similar here on the scout line compared to a generic Light Cav. Now, when it comes to Castle Age Light Cav strength, I would say Mongols are probably the best with their, 28 extra HP. So again, this is all Castle Age upgrades, but with the Jurchens going to be running into Mongols this time. So, you know, how do they compare against the best of the best in a straight-up fight? Knowing that Mongols also have the advantage in being able to tank extra arrow fire, which is, again, a bit more helpful in terms of raiding. Holy cow, this is good. This is a good freaking combat bonus, guys. We just beat a bunch of Mongol Light Cav in Castle Age with our Jurchen Light Cav. Now, again, you could still argue that the Mongol bonus is more useful because of the extra HP helping with the raiding, but this bonus, and I think what I'm trying to highlight here, is that it is a very strong combat bonus. Alright, again, now we're back to generic, fully upgraded Hussars with our own slightly faster attacking Hussars. So we know we're going to win this fight, but let's just see if the advantage that this confers is consistent throughout all the ages. Honestly, it looks like it. Yeah, we have around, 2.5 to 3 HP worth of Hussar HP remaining. So yeah, so throughout the entire game, that attack speed bonus is, again, it's pretty darn consistent. And definitely very powerful with the scout line. Alright, one last test here for the scouts. I would say probably the best average scout unit in the late game is the Winged Hussar with poles. You could argue that, there are some that are better in certain situations, but as these guys are definitely the kings of actual melee combat when it comes to the scout line. I imagine we're still going to get clapped here. Oh, yeah, you bet. Oh, you bet. Yeah, these, the Winged Hussars here for poles only lost around half their HP, so you're not beating Winged Hussars from poles in close combat, but in terms of facing other generic Hussar civs, you are up there in the late game, which is certainly something that is a strength of the civilization. Alright, Step Lancer testing time, so we get the 1.67 reload time, same as the scout line, so let's see how much of a difference this makes when it comes to no upgrades. Now, Step Lancers are an inherently snowbally unit, so I imagine this is actually going to be very, very powerful for them. Oh, yeah. This is 15v15, guys. I still have, a little bit more than 7 HP left, so I only lost around half my numbers here with no upgrades. Yeah, this is a very powerful bonus for your Step Lancers. Alrighty, post-Castle Age upgrades test, we have humans here, so they are a little bit faster than us, but there is no, true generic Step Lancer civ, so this is about as close as we can get. Yeah, definitely around the same results as before. Very, very good bonus. Let's see post-imp now. Alright, so these are Mongol Step Lancers again, which are probably going to be the best when it comes to just raw melee combat against most units. So they have the extra 24 HP over us. Let's see how much our faster attack speed and 1 extra melee armor matter. Dang. Okay, guys, these Jurchen Step Lancers are like the kings of melee combat when it comes to the Step Lancers. Just like with the scouts, I mean, the scouts aren't actually the best in the game. You're going to lose versus, say, Bulgarians who have the even faster attack speed than you do. You're going to lose to Poles, obviously, but when it comes to Step Lancers, in raw melee combat, they're going to beat all of the other Step Lancer civs, which is going to be Mongols, Cumans, Tatars, and Khitans. So definitely a very notable strength for the civilization. Here is the Step Lancer. Alrighty, so the last unit that this is going to impact in practice is the Cav Archer, so you can see you got a 1.67 reload time. Note that the Mongols are at 1.6. So let's see the straight-up shootout and see how much of an advantage this faster fire rate confers. These are just against generic Cav Archers, nobody's got any upgrades. This is sort of your baseline advantage that I've been trying to show you. With Cav Archers, there's always a little bit more randomness because they're so inaccurate before Thumb Ring, but yeah, you can see that we're still getting around half our numbers left, same with the Step Lancers. A little bit less, but again, there's a little bit more randomness. But remember, guys, Jurchens don't have Thumb Ring. And as we'll see in post-imp, they don't have Parthian tactics. So this should be a more interesting comparison here in the mid-game. Alrighty, guys, so this is post-Castle Age. So you can see here that the Saracen Cav Archers have 1.8 reload time with Thumb Ring, whereas we have the 1.67 reload time, so 0.13 seconds faster for the Jurchens, but we don't get that extra accuracy with Thumb Ring. So let's see how this actual shootout goes. Knowing that their units are going to be hitting all of the shots, I imagine the extra accuracy with Thumb Ring is better. Maybe not. This is why we do these testing videos, guys. Okay, so Castle Light, it's at least about as good as Thumb Ring. Looks like Thumb Ring might be slightly better, but the point here is that it's at least almost as good as Thumb Ring, and you get it for free, remember, whereas, you know, non-Tadar civs actually have to research Thumb Ring. So that's actually a pretty darn good result there for the Jurchen Cav Archers for that mid-game play. All right, now with post-imp, things should definitely look a lot worse for the Jurchens, because yes, you still have that 0.13 faster reload time, but because you miss Parthian tactics, you can see these Saracen Cav Archers, which are generic but fully upgraded, having that 2 extra Pierce Armor over us and I guess not that much higher accuracy. Higher accuracy for sure, though, and that extra Pierce Armor. Now, you could possibly make an argument that the Jurchen Cav Archers are going to be better in, like, raw combat against melee units, but I'd still say that the accuracy is super important in late game, as you're doing a lot more poking and prodding with Cav Archers in the late game. So yeah, Jurchen Cav Archers still going to be very... It's like a reliable unit in the mid game, for sure, but not really one that you're going to want to be the focus of your late game army, at least in most situations. So guys, of course, with the Fire Lancer testing, to sum it up from before, Jurchens were one of the weaker Fire Lancer civs because they missed that last armor upgrade, but still, that faster attack speed definitely can help, especially against Cav units, because you're just delivering that damage faster, the bonus damage. So that's going to be the faster reload time bonus. Honestly, it's just a solid military bonus. It makes your light Cav very strong, if not like the very best. Step Lancers, they might just have the best Step Lancers, honestly, guys, with that faster reload time and being such a snowbally unit. And then Cav Archers, they're like reasonable, but nothing top tier for sure. So definitely just a good, strong military bonus that gives some honestly interesting dynamics, right? You have matchups that are better at certain stages than at others. Yes, you're really good in pure melee combat, but that doesn't help really with your raiding potential. So definitely a big fan of this bonus. All right, next we're going to take a look at their next couple of bonuses together. Siege Engineer is available in the Castle Age, and Siege and Fortification upgrades cost minus 75% wood and research 100% faster. So Siege Engineer is available in the Castle Age is pretty straightforward. I mean, I know we're in the Imperial Age here, but, you know, trust me, you can get it in Castle Age. And then, of course, you have the big wood discount and research speed buff, but what does that actually apply to? Well, as it so happens, it applies to Siege Engineers itself. You can see getting 150 wood now with 500 food, so it's still expensive for a Castle Age upgrade, but still a very good one. The researching fast as well. It applies to Masonry. You can see it now only costing 44 wood with 150 food. Treadmill Crane costing 50 wood with 300 food. Does not affect Ballistics. Does not affect Chemistry, which doesn't cost wood anyway. It probably would affect Murder Holes if Murder Holes costed wood, but it doesn't. It affects Fortified Wall. Look at that, 200 food and 25 wood. Guard Tower, 100 food, 62 wood. This makes a Guard Tower defense really strong for the Civ, because you can just research that very cheaply and quickly. And then you've got Arrow Slits as well, 250 food, 62 wood. And then Architecture, 300 food and 50 wood, and I'll get to keep in a moment. This also affects a couple of other technologies as well. You can see here at the castle, you can research hoardings more cheaply and quickly, so it's only 100 wood instead of 400 wood for hoardings. And then Sappers, 400 food and 50 wood, so all of those techs, cheaper and faster to research. Yeah, look how fast Guard Tower research is. Really, really nice to just sort of get that if you're getting Mangonel pushed. And then Keep is the last one here, 500 food and 87 wood. And that's a fair amount of wood savings throughout the game, and I really think will go a long way in reinforcing the identity of Jurchens as a defensive powerhouse. Alright, the last civilization bonus for the Jurchens is that units receive minus 50% friendly fire damage. So this is very straightforward. When it comes to friendly fire damage, you will get all of the area effect damage to your own units, but not the direct hit damage. So you can see here, the rocket cart should be dealing around 20 damage here to the knight. Danger close! Yeah, you can see that the rocket cart deals 40 damage and ignores armor. Knight took exactly 20 HP worth of damage. If we swap over here to the Chinese player, you can see it took 40 damage. So, very straightforward, nice and simple. Goes from units taking full blast damage to half blast damage. Now, when it comes to units that deal friendly fire for the Jurchens, that does include their Grenadier. It does deal friendly fire damage. And then it applies to their rocket carts, and bombard cannons. Those are the only things that deal friendly fire damage. Demo ships don't deal friendly fire damage. Petards don't deal friendly fire damage. It's why they're, I guess maybe one of the reasons they're not actually classified as gunpowder units. But yeah, that's our last bonus. It's just going to be a helpful little bonus in big chaotic games, and it combines well with the fact that you have a lot of siege units and melee cavalry units. Yeah, just a good solid bonus there. All right, now moving on to the unique techs. We'll get to the unique units in a little bit. So Fortified Bastions, it's a pretty straightforward effect. You know, just 500 HP per minute on all fortifications. Now, what exactly do fortifications mean? We'll get to in a moment. But 350 food and 250 wood. Pretty cheap, and honestly, it feels like a pretty strong tech. Also, despite the... it may be indicating that the fortification upgrades are cheaper and research faster, this does not apply to fortified bastions, despite that literally being in the name. Anyway, here I have a slew of buildings that might get the fortification designation. We have castles, PCs, towers, outposts, and then both types of walls and gates. So obviously castles will get that 500 HP boost. That does apply to TCs as well. It applies to towers. It applies to gates. It applies to stone walls. And then it applies to both of the palisade gates and walls. And it's because it's the flat 500 HP per minute, it means that these lower HP buildings are going to rocket back up to max HP very quickly. It does not apply to outposts for some reason. I guess they're not fortification-y enough. But it applies to all of the other buildings that you think it might apply to. And you can see here that it's really helping out that castle just kind of skyrocketed in HP. This is one of the things about the Civ that I do think might need to be tuned down a little bit. I like the idea of the bonus for sure, but I mean, on paper, this feels like a very powerful boost. And the other thing I want to test is how much this affects a trebuchet war potential. All right, so you have all of the building upgrades already as Jurchens. You can see we got the full 7,028 HP castles. How does this impact a Treb war? So we have 2 Japanese trebuchets right here on each castle. This is a Spanish castle, full upgrades, no bonuses. Let's see how much of an impact this makes. I mean, obviously, we know that the Jurchen castle is going to win, but, like, I mean, 2 Japanese Trebs is already a fair amount of damage coming at you. So in theory, this feels like it should be less impactful during a Treb war when there's just so much damage coming in, and should probably be more impactful in, like, okay, you save the castle, and then get the free HP behind it. But you can see here, even... Okay, well, it's actually just 1 Treb projectile more. Okay, so maybe it's not as strong as it looks. Let's see how it compares to a Byzantine castle, though. Alright, so now we have a Byzantine castle, but I swapped the Japanese Trebs out for Frank Trebs, so you don't get the extra attack speed. But yeah, this is why we do these tests, guys. I was worried this might be way too good. But for the most common unit-to-building interaction with Trebs versus castles, it's not making that much of a difference. Although it will further necessitate that you need to not trickle Treb, as they say. Because yeah, the Byzantine castle's still lasting longer, by the looks of things. I guess the same amount of volleys. So basically, your castles are very good. It's nothing that's too broken, though. Gonna do a great job at getting all of your damaged buildings healed back up to full HP, though, so it's a very real bonus as far as that goes. So that is Fortified Bastions. All right, now for the Imperial Age unique tech, Thunderclap Bombs. So we already have tested their effects on the rocket carts and the Luchwans in previous videos, but to briefly summarize, it makes the Jurchen rocket carts basically as good as siege onagers, if not even like a good siege onager at that. So very, very strong effect there. And for the Luchwans, it basically makes them the best ship in the game. Don't know if that's bugged. But yeah, its core effect is that in addition to the main projectiles that all of these units throw, they will be getting a secondary projectile that will explode a little bit later. Before we get into that, though, I want to check out the detonation aspect of it, because I tested that briefly in one of the other videos, and it was, like, really underwhelming there. So let's just see how good it is, because, yeah, those units detonate when defeated. Alright, so let's see just how much explosive blast radius and damage there is. All of these units are, you know, pretty reasonably tightly packed around here, and they're the sorts of units that might end up killing. The Jurchen units. Alright, all of those units are now dead. We go over to Red's POV. Okay, so I guess I was screwing something up in the test previously. It's not that much damage, but it's also... Okay, with the Luchwans, it's pretty big. Okay, the Luchwans ones you have to be very careful about. You can see it's dealt like 40 damage, and is a reasonably large blast radius. The Grenadiers and rocket carts is pretty small, though. I mean, you don't want to just be jumping them with a ton of melee units and, you know, expect nothing bad to happen. But as far as the detonation aspect goes, it's much better than I thought. It's still not, like, amazing, But if you have a bunch of these units that are all dying together, then swarms of units are going to need to be very, very careful when pouncing on the Jurchen units in the late game. So that's definitely worth knowing. Alright, now for the last part of the video, we're going to be checking out the unique units, the Iron Pagoda and the Grenadier. So the Iron Pagoda is, like I said, basically a stand-in for the Knight line. It has the same overall cost of 80, well, it's 135 resources, 80 food, 55 gold, versus the Knight's 60 food and 75 gold. So the Iron Pagoda is 20 more food and 20 less gold. This makes it a bit harder to create in Castle Age when food is at a premium, but a bit easier to create Imperial Age when gold runs low. Now, to do a side-by-side comparison, thankfully the fact that they're so similar to Knights makes these tests a lot easier. So you have 15 more HP than a Knight, so just an advantage there to the Iron Pagoda. You move faster, 1.4 versus 1.35, so the Iron Pagoda actually kind of moves like a medium cavalry instead of a heavy cavalry. Reload time is a little bit slower at 1.9 versus 1.8. And this is what I was talking about with the faster attack speed not really mattering with the Iron Pagoda, is because there is no point of comparison. They actually, what the devs did is they made the base reload time of the Iron Pagoda pretty slow, and then it's like 2.3 or something, so that with the Jurchen bonus, it's basically in line with most other Cav unique units, which is 1.9. Melee armor is a little bit lower for the Iron Pagoda, Pierce armor a bit higher, so 1.3 versus 2.2. And then 12 attack versus 10. You know, another point there for the Iron Pagoda. And of course, there is the special effect, which on the 30-second cooldown, I think, you will block the first melee attack. So let's just see how they perform against a Knight. Again, equal numbers and equal resources. That is all the same. Now, the Iron Pagoda, honestly, I'm a little worried about. It feels like just a better Knight. Yeah, you can say that. We lost 3 Iron Pagodas facing 15 Knights. A lot of these guys are lower in HP, of course, but, yeah. Yeah, guys, Iron Pagodas are really good. Okay, so I double-checked, and the reload time for the charge attack is actually, or the charge defense, I suppose, is actually a minute, not 30 seconds. So you get to block 1 melee attack every minute. So it's not that huge of a boost, and in my opinion, is going to be way less annoying than the Shurvamsha Rider. I mean, it has a charge of 1, as opposed to several different charges. Alright, so before we do more Iron Pagoda testing, let's see exactly how, or what blocks, or what the shield blocks, rather. Okay, so it looks like it is not affected by rocket carts. It only is affecting the Knight here, not the rocket cart. As you can see, it will amusingly affect demo ships. Look at that. Iron Pagoda did not care at all about the demo ship. That's pretty funny. And then the last thing I want to see is the melee projectile, so like a Mameluke. Okay, so already this is better than the Shurvamsha Rider. It only blocks actual melee attacks. It doesn't block something like a Mameluke. It doesn't block rocket carts. So already, if you're worried about this unit's ability being just kind of like a Shurvamsha Rider but melee, it is definitely weaker than that. So I'm a big fan of that. This is just going to be, you get the first hit in against melee units. That's really what this boils down to. All right, now to get into the actual unit testing here of the Iron Pagoda. So you can see here, this is post-Castle Age upgrades. And I guess, in case it wasn't obvious what affects the Iron Pagoda, Husbandry, Bloodlines, and the Cav armor. I mean, it's basically like a Knight. So how did they perform versus various types of units? So you can see here we have equal resources for the Longswordsmen versus the Knights and the Iron Pagodas. And the Knights and Iron Pagoda should all win this. Let's just see how much they win it by. So the Iron Pagodas started with 15. 12 of them are left, although a lot of them are very low HP. And they also killed the Longswordsmen faster, owing to their higher base attack. So you got 12 left versus, let's see, Cyan here, 8 left. So definitely a notable advantage there versus Swordsmen. Higher attack, higher HP, and you have the charge block attack. All right, Pikemen now. So the Pikemen still should be a counter to both of these units, obviously. But the Iron Pagoda, in my mind, should be performing better. I mean, the Iron Pagoda performs better versus every melee unit. I'm just curious to see how much better. But obviously, yeah, Pikemen are going to counter these guys. That blocked attack is going to matter so much when the Pikemen themselves have so much of their... Like, they have a slow reload time, but very high attack versus cavalry. So versus the Knights, 20 of the 30 pikemen I had were left over with, you know, a smattering of HP left. Whereas there were 17 left here with a little bit less HP. So again, pikemen do counter the Iron Pagoda, just like they counter Knights, but a little bit less so. The Iron Pagoda is going to still outperform the Knight by a little bit. Okay, again, last melee unit we need to test versus camels. Again, the camels still should be a counter, but let's just see how much better the Iron Pagoda does than the knight. Camels attack faster and have relatively less bonus damage than halves do, so it's probably a little bit less of a difference. But the extra HP is also a very real thing, and extra attack. Alright, so you can see that the Iron Pagodas definitely did a lot better versus the camels. There were 12 knights left versus the knights when I had 18 camels to start with. There are only 5 camels left, so yes, the camels are still going to be cost efficient versus the Iron Pagoda, but it's not as overwhelming as it might have been if they were just regular knights. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now to do it for ranged units. Alright, now versus ranged units. So the Iron Pagoda still has more pierce armor and HP and attack than a knight. So this is where I feel a little concerned that it's just going to be a better knight. But let's see. I mean, it was 25 crossbowmen versus 15 knights. Or Iron Pagodas. I mean, despite being pretty explicitly an anti-melee unit, I don't know, guys. The Iron Pagodas still feel really good. Now, granted, you have to make them from a castle, right? So they should be better than knights, but it just kind of feels like they're better than knights in almost every way. Also, keep in mind that the unique units tend to be very powerful in the castle age, or castle unique units, so that's also something to keep in mind. But yeah, it really did not feel like the crossbowmen were especially effective here. Alright, now for Cav Archers. Let's see if this is any better, but again, the fact that the Iron Pagodas have the same movement speed as the Cav Archers does have me a bit concerned. Yeah, this... I mean, even with those 3 Iron Pagodas being lazy, this really doesn't feel great. And this is me having all the time in the world and space to micro around with the Cav Archers, which is obviously not the case in so many in-game situations. Okay, well that was just bad micro! I mean, it's an Ornlu micro test. There's only so much you can ask for. Rip those Cav Archers. So that's basically the Castle Age test, guys. Basically, Iron Pagodas are better than Knights in every single way. So let's see what the difference is compared to Paladins, which I think should probably be a bit closer. Because remember, going for like a Knight replacement in Castle Age usually isn't that viable. So although I'm like a little concerned that the Iron Pagodas are performing so well, I don't think that like massed Iron Pagodas in Castle Age is something that we really need to think all that much about. Alright, so when it comes to the stats of the Elite Iron Pagoda compared to the Paladin, you can see that the Paladin has more attack and more HP. So the Iron Pagoda, although it's incredibly strong in the Castle Age, once you get to Imperial Age, the stats are going to look a lot more comparable. The reload time is the same as a Paladin, the armor is the same as a Paladin, and you really just sort of get... You trade 20 HP and 1 attack for that extra charge factor, or the, charge defense factor. So you can see that as strong as the Iron Pagodas are in mid-game, in late game, they're going to be much more comparable to Paladins, which is still very good. Okay, now to do the Imperial Age unit tests, we're just going to start with the Archers this time, because I already made this test, so might as well use it again. Alright, so we have our 20 Cav Archers versus 15 Iron Pagodas. Man, those 3 Iron Pagodas are so lazy. Hey, lazy butts. Wow, look how lazy that guy's being. He just got shot by a bunch of arrows and didn't care. Oh, that's bad micro. At the very least, the Iron Pagodas look awesome. I don't think we can fault the art team on much of anything they do with DE. Everything, all the new units look awesome. Alright, so you can see that it's not great for the Cav Archers. That faster movement speed relative to Paladins is a big deal, but their stats don't feel quite so overtuned in Imperial Age as they do in Castle Age. I mean, yeah, it's not great for the CA, but it's not a complete disaster either. Still not a matchup you're super excited about, though. Alright, Arbs time. Let's see how they perform here. Hojum! Gotta love the Saracen voice lines. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not good. But you'd kind of expect this, your knight stand-in to be performing like this. So yeah, they're still gonna be good against ranged units no matter what. Alright, now for the melee tests. We have the 15 Iron Pagodas versus the 15 Paladins. Also, Count Berengar is a Spanish AI name, even though he's represented as the Franks in the campaigns, which is pretty goofy. But yeah, again, this is, in theory, where the Iron Pagodas should be thriving. And, I mean, they're definitely doing well. I mean, they trade well versus Paladins. That blocked melee attack is certainly very relevant. And you can see, we survived with 7 of them left, but a lot of them are on very low HP. So I would say they trade slightly well versus Paladins. Alright, champion time. Same situation. 28 champions. 15 Iron Pagodas, 15 Paladins. But I mean, both of these units perform well here anyway. So, there's 9 Iron Pagodas left, and 11 Paladins. Okay, so the Paladins actually slightly outperformed the Iron Pagodas here. Which makes sense because Paladin, of course, with Cavalier plus Paladin, it's what, 300 food, 300 gold for Cavalier, 1350 for Paladin. So it's what, 1600 food and 1050 gold to get from Knight all the way up to Paladin. And for Iron Pagoda, it's 950 food, 750 gold. So it's cheaper, but the ceiling, even versus melee units, is actually a little bit lower for the Iron Pagoda. Well, I guess versus those champions. They still perform well versus Paladins. Alright, Halb time. Again, the Iron Pagoda should be outperforming the Paladins simply because they eat that first huge attack shot from the Halberdiers. I mean, they should still lose, but it should be losing less badly. Okay, less badly is a very relative term here. Alright, so these had 24 of the 30 Halbs left, and these had 17. So, I mean, the Iron Pagodas do perform better versus the Halbs, although they are still countered by them very effectively, so that's still something to keep in mind. Alright, last test here for the Iron Pagoda is going to be versus Camels. And again, they still should lose, but maybe less bad than the Paladins do. And they're dying pretty fast. 10 versus 12 Camels left, so yeah, I mean, it's not that much better, honestly. Camels and Pikemen still counter really hard. So, thoughts on the Iron Pagoda. In Castle Age, it's definitely just a very good knight, and I'm a little worried it might be too strong, but maybe not too much because Iron Pagodas are just Castle Cav unique units in general aren't really used all that often because they're so hard to get going relative to knights. That said, the stats are really good in Castle Age, and they outperform knights against basically everything. In Imperial Age, they seem to be more or less akin to Paladins. They win a bit versus Paladins. They still get countered by the things that Paladins get countered against. They are, I guess, okay versus archery units. They have a little bit more movement speed and less HP than a Paladin when it comes to chasing down ranged units. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good unique unit. It's definitely a decent stand-in for the Knight line, but in terms of the differences aren't as stark as you might expect with a unique unit. It's basically a good Knight. That really is the long and short of it, so definitely glad I did the testing on this because I was worried it would be really, really good. I mean, and it is good, right? But not, I think, egregiously so, except maybe in Castle Age. Alrighty, last but not least for our Jurchens video, we have the Grenadier unique unit. This guy is available in the Castle Age, costs 35 food and 70 gold, and it says Jurchen unique gunpowder unit with a ranged blast attack, but cannot attack at close range. Strong versus infantry and tight groups of units. Weak versus ranged soldiers and units at close range. So, 35 HP. 11 attack, 0.96 movement speed, 3.45 reload time, 1/1 armor, 6 and 1 range. So as for what upgrades benefit these guys, it's basically just the archer armor upgrade, same as a hand cannoneer, and thunderclap bombs, which we'll get to in a second. But as far as their damage goes, you can see you get 1 versus spearmen, 4 versus buildings, 3 versus rams, and 9 versus infantry. So they are an anti-infantry unit. They are also pretty inaccurate though, So if I attack the building here, it should be doing 15 damage. Throws a little bit of a grenade like that, and you can see 15 damage has been dealt. So what I want to see is how Thunderclap Bombs and the secondary effect works with the Grenadier. Alright, so again, now we have Thunderclap Bombs research, so let's see how much damage that secondary projectile does. Alright, so 15 damage, and then there was the secondary explosion that... Oh boy, it's math time. Alright, so it would have been at 470 HP, and then we lost... 16 more HP. So I guess the secondary explosions deal like, what, around half-ish damage? But it's like there's 2 distinct explosions afterwards. Yes, okay, so you can see here that there are a few bombs that go off after the initial explodey bit. But you can also see how inaccurate it is with the Grenadier. And keep in mind that these guys do deal friendly fire damage, although that is reduced via a Civ bonus. Now, let's see how these guys stack up against units. Alright, so now for the unit testing. We have post-Castle Age upgrades here, and funnily enough, the only real good comparison is the Slinger, as far as anti-infantry Castle Age-based archery range unique units goes. So, versus Swordsman, these guys should be a counter, so let's see how they're gonna perform. I forgot to set up the trigger here. Whoops. Alright, now let's give this a go. So yeah, the minimum range is still definitely affecting these units here. I mean, the Slingers just kind of massacred those units and see... Okay, so, like, we still win, but the Slingers are way more cost-efficient as pure anti-infantry units in the mid-game, so that's good to know. So although the Grenadiers are going to be very scary, they're not, like, as scary as they could be, I suppose. But now let's try versus archers. Alright, so now we have these crossbowmen here, and I put them at least relatively far away, so the units are at least a little bit more likely to bunch up, which should improve the prospects here of the Grenadier. Now, archers are still, in theory, supposed to be a counter, but it also says the Grenadiers are good versus clumped up units. Okay, those guys are kind of being jerks and helping out the other side, but even so, the slingers are performing much, much better here versus the ranged units. Basically even, really, with the crossbowmen. They have a slower attack speed, but more HP. So the Grenadiers are still going to be getting countered by ranged units, for sure. Alrighty, let's see how they perform versus skirmishers, because maybe the blast damage here of the Grenadier is going to be a little bit better. But yeah, remember with that 35 food, 35 food, right? Yeah, 35 food, 75 gold cost, that's super expensive for a unit. Maybe if we, like, I don't know, try and get that blast damage to be as useful as possible. Oh, this guy really wants to help, man. So did we at least deal more damage? There are 15 skirms left over here and 17 over here. Yeah, so basically, I guess compared to slingers, the Grenadiers, they still die to the slingers, right? Or the skirmishers, but they at least deal more damage as well. All right, last Castle Age test here. Knights. Yeah. Not great. I mean, honestly, the Grenadiers in Castle Age seem a little underwhelming. Just because they are so expensive. I mean, gold is a pretty cheap resource in mid-game, it's true, but 70 gold's a lot to spend on a unit. So, clearly, Castle Age, I guess make them if you really want to, but they're not going to be shining, I guess, unless you're facing infantry. Because yes, they do still counter infantry quite effectively. All right, now to round out the video, let's do some Imperial Age testing and see how much Thunderclap bombs really helps this unit, because that's really the only upgrade it benefits from in Imperial Age other than Ring Archer armor. Also, we've swapped the slingers over to hand cannoneers, so we have the more direct one-to-one comparison. And note that the hand cannoneers are also still slightly cheaper than the Grenadiers, although it's not that much compared to, like, the slinger. So, let's see how we go versus champions. Thunderclap bombs and all of their thunderclappy glory. Okay. Okay, I see you. I see what's going on, guys. Okay, I think this really the moral of the story here is how insane Thunderclap bombs is. Now, of course, the hand cannoneers win that with any amount of micro, but, wow. Okay, guys, moral of the story, Thunderclap bombs. Okay, it's really satisfying to use this unit, though. Like, look at that. Oh, that's fun. All right, let's try versus Arbalests. Now, Arbs are normally relatively good versus hand cannoneers, but I have a feeling that the Grenadiers are still going to be doing pretty well. Okay, maybe less well. Okay, Arbs are still a pretty good counter. Okay, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. As insane as the Grenadiers are versus infantry, they are much less scary versus the Arbs. Alright, just a couple more tests here. Let's see the difference versus skirmishers, which again, still should be a reasonable counter. I don't care how bad they're performing, the unit is awesome. So yeah, I mean, again, both units are losing, but the Grenadiers, only 10 out of 30 skirmishers left, and a lot of them are very low HP, whereas there's 16 skirmishers left here against the hand cannoneers, and they all, for the most part, have more HP as well. Alright, before we start the last test, I do remember now that you get one extra range with siege engineers, I guess, for the Grenadier, so that's something to keep in mind, but that just puts them on par with hand cannoneers in the late game. Anyway, last test versus paladins. Again, with micro, you can absolutely make hand cannoneers work versus paladins, but I think the fast movement speed also negates a lot of the effect of Thunderclap bombs, as the units are just often avoiding those projectiles. Although you do get the after effect damage there. Anyway, the paladins had 9 left, with a lot of them on half HP. These had 10 left, so I guess you're still doing a bit better versus paladins than our hand cannoneers, but I think in part that is due to the explosions from Thunderclap bombs. Alright guys, so that concludes all of the, what I hope to be fairly comprehensive testing here of the Jurchens civilization that will be coming to the game on May 6th. I hope you're looking forward to them. I guess for some thoughts from me as to where you're going to play them, I do think that they are going to be relatively good early game on Arabia, thanks to the extra food you get from your hunted and herdable animals, as well as the faster attack speed for your scouts. I think that mid-game, you do have that nice faster attack speed military bonus to help you out, but you don't have an eco bonus at this point, and most civs especially like decent ones on Arabia, are still going to have more compelling mid games than you. That said, in Imperial Age, with your Iron Pagodas, Steppe Lancers, Grenadiers, rocket carts, like, you have a very, very strong late game, and that should work just fine on both Arabia and on other maps. Team game, these guys are still going to be a perfectly good pocket civ. On open maps, just go Steppe Lancers instead of Knights, and I think you'll still be just fine. And then you can go Iron Pagodas in the late game. On closed maps, your eco is still kind of eh. I think Halb Siege could still be something that could give this civ some issues, like especially like really strong infantry and siege civs like Bohemians. But they still should be at least relatively competitive on in late game because you have a strong anti-Halb option with your Grenadier. That said, I think this is a really fun civ and should slot into the game without being too overpowered or too weak. I am a little concerned about the Castle Age Iron Pagodas, and I'm a little concerned about the Luchuans, and I think they might be bugged. But other than that, things with this civ seem strong but relatively well balanced. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. We're going to do the Ketons next and see how they perform. And of course, thanking my Patreon supporters, we have Dan and Jared in the Great Wolf tier, and then Carolyn, Dieter, Liquid Egg Product, Triru, and Tanduri in the Dire Wolf tier. But thank you guys all so much for watching. These videos are very long to make, so I hope you appreciate all the testing. Hope you're looking forward to the civ, and I'll see you guys next time.